Vincent Van Gogh, one of history's greatest artists. His work is celebrated for its raw emotion, vivid colours, and unique perspective. But behind the genius was a man shaped by pain, from the shadow of a brother he never met, to the isolation of a misunderstood childhood. Van Gogh's early life was marked by trauma that echoed throughout his turbulent years. In this video, we'll explore how the wounds of his past may have fueled his art and exacerbated the struggles that ultimately consumed him. Vincent Willem van Gogh was born on March 30th, 1853, in the small Dutch village of Zundert. But before Vincent, there was another, a brother, also named Vincent, who was born exactly 1 year earlier and was stillborn. His parents gave their next child the same name, as if to replace the one they had lost. Imagine growing up with your name already etched in stone, a gravestone, a constant reminder of a life that came before you. Vincent walked past that gravestone often. It was a silent but ever-present shadow that shaped his identity, or perhaps fractured it. The psychological impact of this was profound. Many psychologists believe that being seen as a replacement child can create feelings of inadequacy and a fractured sense of self. For Vincent, it was a burden he carried throughout his life. Vincent's father, Theodorus, was a strict minister, deeply religious and highly disciplined. His upbringing reflected this, an environment of rigid structure, religious devotion, and limited emotional warmth. Vincent grew up in a household where expectations were high, emotions were repressed, and failure was not an option. This dynamic also extended to Vincent's relationship with his mother, Anna. While she was devoted to her family, she was emotionally reserved, rarely expressing affection openly. Some biographers suggest that Vincent craved her approval, but often felt he fell short, further fueling his sense of rejection and isolation. As a child, Vincent was described as quiet and withdrawn, often wandering alone through the fields near his home. He had a deep connection to nature, which became a source of solace and later inspiration for his art. But even in his love for the natural world, there was a sense of loneliness. His schooling years were no easier. Vincent struggled to fit in, both socially and academically. He attended a series of boarding schools where he felt isolated and homesick. He was teased for his awkward demeanour and fiery red hair, further reinforcing his feelings of being an outsider. For many children, school is a place to forge friendships and build confidence. But for Vincent, it was another reminder that he didn't belong. By the time he left formal education at 15, his self-esteem was already in tatters. As Vincent entered adulthood, his struggles intensified. He bounced between jobs, unable to settle on a career. He worked briefly as an art dealer, where his passion for art began to emerge. However, Vincent was ultimately unsuccessful as an art dealer due to his inability to connect with clients, frequent conflicts with superiors, and a growing disdain for the commercialisation of art. He then began a brief career as a church missionary, but again this venture ended in failure. This time it was due to his extreme dedication and unconventional methods, which alienated church authorities. While working as a missionary in the impoverished Borinage region of Belgium, he gave away his possessions and lived in near poverty to empathise with the miners. Although his intentions were sincere, his overly zealous approach and disregard for traditional church expectations led to his dismissal, marking yet another setback in his search for purpose and belonging. Concurrent with his failures in employment, shadows of Vincent's childhood trauma manifested in his romantic attachments. Desperate for the unconditional love he was deprived of as a child, he formed one-sided attachments, such as his infatuation with his cousin, Kie Vos Stricker. Despite her firm rejection, Vincent persisted, even holding his hand over a lit candle, vowing not to remove it unless Kie agreed to see him. Her rejection further strained his family ties and deepened his isolation. Following this, Vincent developed a tumultuous bond with Belgian prostitute Sian Hornick. Sian was destitute and had an infant child. She was also pregnant when Vincent met her. Vincent took her and her child into his home as an act of charity, for the relationship turned intimate, although the relationship quickly became untenable and ended in yet another failure for Vincent. These connections, marked by obsession and rejection, mirrored the emotional neglect of his childhood, leaving him feeling abandoned and inadequate. Vincent also struggled deeply with alcoholism and regularly consumed absinthe. While it offered a temporary escape, absinthe worsened his mental health, likely amplifying his depressive symptoms and instability. His reliance on alcohol and failed relationships reveal a man trapped by the unresolved pain of his past, searching for solace in destructive ways. These failures in education, employment, and romance, as well as his relationship with alcohol, reflected an intense internal emotional struggle. Each setback reminded him of his inadequacy, echoing the feelings of rejection he experienced as a child. Modern psychology tells us that early childhood trauma doesn't just affect our emotions, it can alter the very wiring of our brains. Studies show that individuals who experience significant childhood adversity are more likely to suffer from anxiety, depression, and mood disorders later in life. For Vincent, this connection is clear. His early life laid the foundation for the intense emotional struggles he faced as an adult. But through this pain, Vincent found a way to express himself: art. It began as a hobby, a way to channel his emotions, but it quickly became his purpose. Vincent's early drawings were dark and sombre, reflecting the weight he carried. His work wasn't about perfection, it was about honesty. In his letters to his brother Theo, he wrote openly about his struggles. What would life be if we had no courage to attempt anything, he asked. His relationship with Theo was one of the few sources of stability in his life. Theo supported him emotionally and financially, allowing Vincent to pursue his passion even when the world rejected him. It was through Theo's kindness that Vincent was able to concentrate on his art. Vincent's art evolved alongside his emotions. Vincent's earliest work depicted peasant life in rural Holland. He depicted peasants in everyday scenarios such as farming and herding. This early period culminated in his first masterpiece, known as the Potato Eaters. This work reflected his time living in severe austerity while living with the miners in the Bornage. The work was shunned by the art community at the time, which only heightens Vincent's sense of rejection. His resolve was strong, however, and he continued to paint. Between the Potato Eaters and his later masterpieces, Vincent underwent a transformative period of growth and experimentation. After completing his sombre depiction of rural peasant life, Vincent moved to Antwerp, and then later Paris, where his exposure to Impressionist and Neo-Impressionist techniques reshaped his artistic vision. He began to explore different artistic subject matter, gradually abandoning the earthy tones of his earlier work for brighter, more vivid colours. His subjects expanded from the toil of rural labour to include bustling Parisian scenes, delicate floral arrangements, and expressive self-portraits. This period marked a crucial evolution of his technique as he embraced light, movement, and a dynamic use of colour, setting the stage for the iconic works that would define his legacy. Despite his artistic growth, Vincent longed for the rural life, a simpler life, and in 1888 he was on the move again, this time to Arles in southern France. He hoped that his bright lights and colours would inspire his work and improve his health. In Arles he created iconic pieces like the bedroom and sunflowers, but his time was overshadowed by mental health struggles, including the infamous ear-cutting incident after a quarrel with fellow artist Paul Gauguin. Following the incident in Arles, Vincent voluntarily entered the Saint Paul de Mosol Asylum in Saint Remy de Provence. While there, he experienced further mental and physical struggles, becoming gaunt and increasingly unwell. Vincent's determination and passion for art, however, drove him to extraordinary productivity. His time in the asylum, though marked by suffering, also saw the creation of iconic works such as Starry Night, Irises, and Wheatfield Cypresses, cementing his legacy as one of history's greatest artists. After leaving the asylum, Vincent moved again, this time to Auvers-sur-Oise. Only months later, on the 27th of July 1890, Vincent sustained a gunshot wound to his abdomen under mysterious circumstances, believed by some to be a suicide attempt and by others an accident or foul play. Despite the severity of the injury, Vincent managed to walk back to the inn where he was staying. A doctor was summoned, but no surgery was performed due to the bullet's location, and infection soon set in. Over the following 2 days his condition worsened, and on July 29, 1890, Vincent succumbed to his injuries, with his brother Theo by his side. His last words were reportedly, "The sadness will last forever." In the last 70 days of his life, he painted an astonishing 70 works, including masterpieces like Wheatfield with Crows and the Church at Auvers. Today, Vincent Van Gogh is celebrated as one of the greatest artists of all time. His work is a testament to the power of vulnerability and the human spirit's ability to create beauty from pain. But his story is also a reminder of the devastating impact of untreated mental illness. In understanding Vincent's childhood and the struggles he faced, we gain a deeper understanding for the reasons for his emotional instability. Vincent's story is a reminder that even in our most difficult moments, we are capable of creating something meaningful, something beautiful. Even though Vincent's life was cut short, his art will last forever.